The brand new Sigma 20 to 200mm contemporary has no business being this good with this zooming range, with this flexibility at this size and price point. And if you keep watching this video, you'll understand why. Welcome back, this is Luca, and if you've been watching my channel, you know that I'm kind of a sucker for a good all-in-one lens. This is because I do a lot of hiking, so I tend to want to be as lightweight and as compact as possible when I go out, because I don't like lugging around a lot of stuff. And in that case, a good all-in-one lens cuts the deal for me. That is what I need, and this is what I'm good to go most of the time. And up until now, the lens that I've been using on my Sony setup has been the good old Tamron 28mm 2.8 to f5.6 review that you will find over here, somewhere over here. But that changes today, because ever since I purchased this Sigma 20 to 200mm that you see in my hands over here, I realized how good of an option this is for anyone that is looking at one lens to rule them all type of solution, a one lens that does it all. For, unless of course we're talking an extreme low light condition, this is not a good lens for that. It's a 3.5 to 6.3 aperture. That means you're not shooting in super low light. But if you're going for a super zoom solution, you kind of know that already. So it was worth mentioning, but it kind of goes without saying. And let's start with the range, because this is the start of the show. The crazy range that you get out of this lens is unparalleled, especially because it's a useful range. Because going from 20 to 200 allows you to get out with one lens and never regret leaving home another lens. This lens is going to cover so many things that it's the first only one lens that doesn't require, at least for the way I shoot, to bring also a super wide angle lens. And that itself, in and on itself, is a game-changing condition. Especially if you compare this to the 28 to 200mm from Tamron, those 8mm are incredibly useful. And on top of that, if you watch this video that I show you over here, in that video, I found out that the 28mm that I have on the Tamron are not as wide as 28mm in other lenses. So those 28mm are closer to a 30mm equivalent, not equivalent, a 30mm than 28. So that means you have a huge difference in the wide angle capabilities that you get between the Tamron and the Sigma. But the good news, don't stop with the crazy range. This lens has crazy good close-up capabilities with its magnification ratio of 1 to 2, But 1 to 2 doesn't tell you the whole story, because there's other lenses that have a 1 to 2 reproduction ratio. This means that you get half size magnification compared to the real life size. The big difference is that with this lens, you get that 1 to 2 magnification ratio in the most useful range, that is between 28 and 85 millimeters. With the vast majority of lenses, you get the best magnification ratio at the wider end. But for a lens like this, a lens that is supposed to be used outdoors, a lens that is supposed to be used from tourists and stuff like that, giving you the possibility of having a 1 to 2 reproduction magnification at 85 millimeters, this means you get macro capability where you need it the most. Because while 1 to 2 is okay even at the wide end, this means that you need to get very close to your subject. Most of the time you're going to shade your subject. Most of the time you're going to scare your subject away. If you can use the 1 to 2 magnification size at 85 millimeters, this means you're in the perfect macro range. It's no surprise that the vast majority of macro lenses are between 90 and 100 millimeters, 80, 90, 100, 120, because that's where you kind of get the sweet spot of not scaring your subject away and at the same time getting very close and also getting a good perspective of the subject. And this is incredibly good in that regard. That is another feature that makes me love this lens, because it's useful, and it's useful where it matters the most. But even from a construction standpoint, this lens kind of makes no sense. A 20 to 200 millimeters should be bigger than this, should be heavier than this, should not be this compact and lightweight. And by the way, this lens is even smaller than the Tamron 28 to 200, which, yes, it's a third, 2/3 of a stop faster throughout the zooming range, but it doesn't get as wide. This lens is super lightweight. It weighs a little bit over a pound, 550 grams if I'm not wrong. It is resistant to dust and splashes. It is well built like all the contemporary lenses. You get everything that you get out of the contemporary lenses. And it's got an autofocus to monofocus switch on one of the sides and a pretty clever locking mechanism. Now, we all know that lenses over time will tend to creep as you walk, meaning that they tend to extend. What Sigma did was putting a locking mechanism on the lens. This prevents you from basically having the lens elongate as you walk. But this lock you hear over here, it's not something that you need to remember. You need to remember to unlock once you want to zoom. It doesn't lock you in place all the time. If you put enough force into it, the lens unlocks itself as you zoom in. This is the same mechanism that Fuji has put in its 70 to 300 millimeters, and it's, in my opinion, the best way of doing it, because you can lock it, but you don't have, if you're in a rush, you don't have that looking for your locking switch to unlock the lens and then zoom in. The focusing ring is very smooth. It works pretty well. I kind of like the way it works, while the zooming ring is a bit weird because it's stiffer in the wide angle part, and then it gets smoother as you zoom in. It's not linear. The amount of force that you have to put in it to zoom in, it's not linear. Not a big deal, but it was worth mentioning. And as usual, Sigma zooms the other way around, which sometimes gets confusing if you're used to pretty much any other lens manufacturer. The autofocus on this lens has been working incredibly well for both stills and video. On my A7R5, the lens has been working pretty well. This is the Sigma's new HLA motors, which is their best motors for autofocusing, and the fact that it's a small compact lens means that there's not much glass that has to move around, and basically it works flawlessly. Where you would expect a lens like this to kind of let you down is usually image quality. And for me, I was ready to be disappointed. I recently tested the 16 to 300 millimeters for APS-C. You will find the review over here. And I hated that lens because it wasn't good at all, especially when it comes to corners and chromatic aberration. That lens was almost unusable for what I do. And given that this lens, yes, has a smaller zooming range, but it's a very long zooming range anyways, and it's a compact and lightweight lens, I kind of expected to be somehow disappointed and to somehow end up returning the lens because it wasn't good enough for what I was looking for. But to my surprise, this lens is way, way better than I expected. And don't get me wrong, this lens has its flaws, and we're going to discuss about those flaws, but those flaws kind of disappear in the overall goodness of what you get out of this lens. Now, when it comes to testing sharpness and testing lenses in general with Sony, I used my A7R5 61 megapixel sensor. This is as a stress test as you can get in the Sony ecosystem and in any full frame ecosystem for that matter. And so if you have to show the worst of a lens with a camera like this, you're gonna find that out. But to my surprise, this lens is very sharp, even wide open, throughout the zooming range in the center of the frame. I expected to have some kind of a low quality spots here and there. Usually it's either at the widest end or at the telephoto end, but throughout the zooming range, the center sharpness has been incredibly good. Yes, it's better as you stop down, but not by a huge margin. So you stop down only because you want to, not because you need to, if you want a sharp image in the center. The sharpness in the center gets maintained also at the minimum focusing distance. The lens is sharp, usable, surprisingly good in that as well. Where this lens shows some of its compromises is at the image quality in the extreme corners. Not saying the board, like as soon as you get away from the center, the image remains pretty good. When you get to the extreme corners, that's where, especially in the range between 20 and 50 millimeters, you see the worst of this lens. Because wide open corners, the extreme corners are not sharp. They're not sharp at all. They're pretty blurry. But when you stop down, you get to increase the quality, and the sweet spot gets to f9, f11. Those corners, while not perfect, become usable. And this is true pretty much throughout the zooming range between 20 and 50 millimeters. So you can say that the weak spot of this lens is the corners at the wide angle. But this weak spot is not as weak as you could have expected. As you get past 50 millimeters, the corners, even the extreme corners, become more usable. You don't need to stop down as much. The image quality is really good, even wide open. And of course, yes, if you stop down, it's going to get better, but it's not a dramatic day and night difference as it is at the wide end of the lens. And while extreme corners being not as sharp at the wide end may seem like a critical flaw for a lens, in a real world test scenario, this is what I did. I don't think a lens like the 20 to 200 millimeters needs to be tested against charts. This is not what you do with a lens like this. You go in the field and you see if you can use it in a real world or not. And in my real world usage scenario, I can use this lens without any doubt. Do I have to stop down at the wide end if I want the best out of the image? Yes. But realistically, if I am shooting landscapes, I'm going to stop down anyways. I am still going to go between f8 and f11 anyways if I'm shooting any type of serious landscape photography. But aside from extreme corner sharpness at the wide end, this lens shines when it comes to every other image quality aspect that you want to look at. Chromatic aberration are very well controlled. Again, this is a super zoom lens. Usually chromatic aberration are totally out of control. With this one, there is some, but you can balance those in post, and they're never prominent to the point that they are distracting. This lens provides pretty nice sun stars. They're not as good as those that you can find in the Sony 16 to 25, which is one of the best lenses in that regard, but they're still usable and they're good enough to be used even in a professional landscape photography scenario. And it performs way better than expected when it comes to the flare resistance. Shooting right into the sun, this lens performs really well, way better than I actually expected. Because usually lenses like this has pretty big compromises, and flare is one of those areas where these lenses start to suffer big time. With this lens, this is not the case. And if that was not enough to convince you, even the bokeh is way better than I expected, because usually a super zoom lens doesn't get you incredible bokeh. This is one of those areas where you would expect the bokeh to be nervous, to be a little bit not great. That's what you would expect. Well, with this lens, while it's not as smooth as an 85mm f1.4, it would be silly to expect that. So, all in all, aside from the corner weakness when you wide open at the wide end, this lens has no visible flaws. And for a super zoom with a 22 to 100 millimeters range in this size, this lens is fairly small. On an A7R5, this lens gets handled pretty easily without any issue at all. The performance that you get out of this lens just make no sense. This is why I'm overly excited about this lens. And when compared to the lens that has been the golden standard for super zoom lenses for full frame in the latest years, meaning the Tamron 28 to 200 millimeters, while the Tamron is better at the wide angle, especially in the extreme corners, especially at the widest aperture settings, the Sigma gets better once you get past 50 millimeters. The Sigma seems to be a little bit better in the corners than the Tamron is. And yes, the Tamron is between a third and two-thirds of a stop faster throughout the zooming range. So you have a slight advantage when it comes to low light in that one. But aside from those two things, in every other aspect, the Sigma is better. It's got better range, better bokeh, better macro capabilities, better colors too, much better flare resistance, better sun stars. Everything is better. And when it comes to the autofocus, there's no comparison there. The Sigma does way better than the Tamron does. It's not that the Tamron is bad, it's just that the Sigma is spot on all the time. When it comes to video, you're seeing me vlogging on the 22 to 100 at 20 millimeters with my A7R5 with my active stabilization on. Let me just rotate. And you're seeing that despite the minimal crop that you have with the active stabilization, I'm still capable of vlogging without any issue. And I'm not even using a selfie stick. I'm not stretching my arm. This would be if I stretch my entire arm. So I'm in a, let's just say, comfortable position right now to vlog, and it's more than enough. So from a vlogger, outdoorsy vlogger perspective, this is a game-changing lens. Just because with one lens you can do it all. You can go from vlogging to just shooting whatever it's in front of you, and you don't have to worry about changing lenses, not being wide enough, or anything that may concern you in that regard. From a video quality perspective, the lens reflects the same qualities that you see in photos, with the added bonus that if you're shooting 4K 60, you crop a little bit in, and for macro shots, this is even better. And that is definitely a great addition. The one concern that you may have when it comes to video is that, as I mentioned, the zooming isn't super smooth. And at the same time, as you zoom in and out, the lens loses focus. It's not parfocal by any stretch of imagination. So this means basically zooming while recording video is not an option. That may or may not be an issue depending on how you shoot. But if it's not a big deal for you, it's just a minimal concern. The other thing is you have a little bit of focus breathing at the wide end, but it's very minimal, and it steps in only when you go from super close to infinity. So not a big concern there either. From a stabilization standpoint, the lens isn't stabilized, so you need to rely on your camera. And this means that probably on Sony you have decent results, but on a Panasonic, we all know Panasonic does stabilization in video like no one else. You're gonna get better results. But even on Sony, as long as you stay on a wide to normal focal length, it's fine. Once you get to 200 millimeters, you either find a way to stabilize yourself and help the camera, or otherwise you're gonna have some
jerky movements here and there. But again, given my experience with other third-party lenses that are stabilized and don't work really well with the Sony a7R5, I'd rather have this than having a stabilized lens which is more expensive, bigger, and then risk that those two stabilization conflict with each other rather than helping each other. So from a video quality standpoint, the lens does pretty well. Even the autofocus tracks really well. There's nothing to complain about. It's a very competent lens and it's absolutely recommended for video. Again, provided you know that you cannot zoom while you're shooting and you have a minimal focus breathing at the wide end if you go from super close to infinity. Aside from that, you shouldn't be concerned at all.
Now, when it comes to the price, this 20 to 200 millimeters gets sold, if I'm not wrong, at $999 in the US, a little bit less euros in Europe, I believe 920, 950, something like that. And while it's not cheap, for the quality you get out of this lens, for the uniqueness that you have out of this lens, for the flexibility that this lens gives you, I believe this is a fair price. There is nothing in the market that gets even close to what this lens can get you when you consider everything. And the fact that the image quality with this lens is sometimes better than the competition despite the range being wider, it's kind of mind-blowing. And yes, the Tamron costs a lot less, 30-40% less than the Sigma. But in my opinion, if you're buying a lens like this, you're buying it once and you're keeping it basically forever. I think the best investment is still on this Sigma 22 to 100 millimeters. Now, we don't know what the new 25 to 200 millimeters Tamron is going to be. They announced it, but we haven't seen anything out of that. But my thing is, with what this lens can do, with what the 22 to 200 can do, Tamron will have to pull off something special to make me or anyone like me give up those 5 millimeters on the wide end to get the Tamron lens. And as you can tell, I'm so high on this 20 to 200 millimeters lens that I will go as far as saying that the presence of this lens may sway some potential user from one system to another. This is going to become one of those lenses that are a decision-making factor in the choice of the system that you're going. If you're going from any system, many old system, if you're coming from DSLR, if you're coming from a smaller sensor system and you want full frame, the presence of this lens for a specific demographic of users may sway the decision, may push people to go Sony or L mount, meaning Leica, Panasonic, and whatever, just because of the presence of this lens. This is how important in the lens landscape that we have this lens is going to be. Now, as I mentioned, this is going to be valid only for a specific demographic of people. There's a lot of people that will never look at a lens like this because they don't want the compromise of a super zoom. But for those who are looking for a super zoom lens, this lens is actually a game changer. Now, for me, that's it for today. I want to thank you for watching, and I want to ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. I got a lot more stuff coming. I got the Viltrox 85 1.4 Pro review coming. I got the Godox V480 review coming. I got a surprise video that I can't wait to put on the channel. There's a lot of stuff that are coming. Subscribe, leave me a thumbs up, hype this video, and ciao. Grazie, and I'll see you in the next one.